Yes, so there's
Okay.
record.
Okay.
Now, who can be an icon of Christ? The question haunts me. Documents of the Second Vatican Council teach that all good people who are part of the church, all good people caught within the net the world calls Christianity, all these good people relying on the exquisite promise of Christ's resurrection, are the body of Christ. It would stand to reason then that all good people means precisely that. All good people means all good men and women. Yet the Catholic Church has excised half its members from the fold. Cut free are all women. How? Women cannot be ordained to church ministry, even though the clearest and most complete church histories include ordained women. What is the argument against ordaining women? The reduction of the complex reasoning is that women do not image Christ. Women cannot symbolize Christ. Women are not icons of Christ. That is plain wrong. Not only is it wrong, it is a statement that redounds to the most serious and most dangerous views of women around the world. At this writing, there are 2.2 billion Christians, nearly a third of the world's population, living, many suffering, on the earth, on the planet that the Irish poet and Nobel laureate Seamus Heaney once said was in danger of becoming a dead red berry hung in space. More than half of these Christians hugging our fragile earth are Catholic Christians of one description or another. They may be Roman Catholics, surely the largest of the Catholic churches. They may belong to one of the 23 other Catholic churches looking toward Rome for leadership. But without doubt, half of these people, at least, are female. They are infants, girls, young women, adults, and elderly women of every shape and size, of every colour and nationality. These wonderful, beautiful females populate fully half the Catholic churches, whether Roman or Melkite or Ukrainian or Greek or any other. And they live their entire lives under the cloud of modern church regulations that decree they cannot be ordained to serve as ministers to the whole church or even solely to other women. They cannot be ordained because it is said they cannot image Christ. It is a scandal. It is more than a scandal. It is a disfigurement on the entire body of Christ, rendered by those who would deny both history and theology. Those words are written by our guest today, Phyllis Sagano. And when you pick up that introduction, if that doesn't get you hooked on reading the entire book, I don't know what would. Phyllis, welcome to our podcast today. Thank you so much for your time. And wow, when I read that introduction, I was so moved by it, the passion, also too, the directness of it. There's no pulling any punches here. And I thought, wow, to write so passionately, the first question I wanted to ask you was, what has sustained you? I know you've worked on this for so long, and yet you write with fire. And I think for all of us women in the church who have hung in there, the secret to your fire, if you could share that with us, I think we'd all appreciate it and learn from it.
Well, you're the head of an institution that teaches Jesuit spirituality. So yeah. I'll throw that back at you. I think really it has been a passion. It's been a vocation. It's been something that I've worked on for now, gosh, almost 40 years. I think it's really because I feel that the Spirit is moving in the church. I mean, if you talk about my passion today, people don't consider me such a nutcase anymore when I start talking about these things. But the impetus for speaking about it is not just speaking about women being ordained as deacons in the Catholic Church. I mean, that's the least of it. The Catholic Church is a multi-billion person institution that influences the entire world. And for the church not to restore its tradition of recognizing that women can indeed be ordained, can be sacramentally ordained, can be ordained as deacons who can preach in the Mass vested. For the church not to recognize that and the church not to proclaim it throughout the world, then I blame the church that will not recognize that with all of the disgraces that are vested upon women. The menstruation huts, the dowry burnings in India, the beatings, the rapes, the murders, the spousal abuse. All of these things redound to the church, to my mind, redound to the church not accepting the fact that women are made in the image and likeness of God, that women can image Christ.
Do you think, I'm interested in that you think that the church still has that influence on secular society. We've grown more and more secular. The church through its scandals too, has really lost a lot of the people who were committed to it and for it. Do you think, and yet you still think that the Catholic Church has that type of influence across the world?
Well, if you only want to call it a negative influence, I mean, if they don't do it, they're not helping.
Sure.
If they do it, they may help. I think to be able to point to the church as an institution that effectively locks women out, you are able to, if you are so inclined, to support your own misogyny, to support your own downplaying of women in whatever society you control or in which you work. So whether or not the church is accepting the history, its own history of ordaining women as deacons or not, is distinct from if it does, then there is one less place to point to as a place supporting misogyny, supporting the downplaying of the role of women in the world.
And Phyllis, the other thing that interested me also is the fact that the church once did and now does not. For those who aren't familiar, of course, with the tradition, but I think it's really interesting because a lot of people wouldn't know that the reason that this is an issue today, the reason it is a passion today, is not because it's novel or it's just invented in our society today, but what you're doing is tapping into an original source. My area of special interest is charism and getting back to the original charism and the original inspiration. And I think that's so important today. So could you, just for those, we'll have a diverse audience with all different understandings and coming from different places. Could you just take us through what happened? Why was it that women were ordained and then they were not ordained? And today it's so difficult to get that recognition.
Well, before ordination, we have ministries, and we have in Scripture one person who is called a deacon. Her name is Phoebe. She's the only person in Scripture with the job title deacon. And then there are the apostles. And as the church developed over centuries, the point of laying on of hands, of choosing an individual and ordering that person to a specific job became more and more formalized. So you eventually had the diaconate and the episcopate, the bishops, and then somewhat later on, the bishops couldn't do everything. They had priests to help them, who at the beginning were really more parish priests or pastors who would be managing and running territories. But as the church developed, the business of actual ordination and took place and began to be formalized. We have in the Apostolic Constitutions, which are very old documents, the formulae for ordaining women as deacons. Now, as you go through the centuries, we will find that there are various formulae, various liturgical ceremonies to ordain men and women as deacons, to ordain men as subdeacons, to ordain men as priests, to to choose or bless people as lectors or acolytes, exorcists and porters. And things get pretty formal as you move through the Middle Ages. And a thing called the cursus honorum, the course of honor, developed. And by that time, the paths for men and women had pretty much separated. Women were very much put into the monastery, and their ministry was one more of prayer with some service, but the diaconate went with them into the monastery. And so you did have the consecration of the abbess, but you also had her ordained as a deacon, and some of the ceremonies kind of squished the two together. But you had other people ordained as deacons who would serve as hebbies, hebdomaдаries, to lead the prayer in the monasteries. But meanwhile, on the outside, the cursus honorum was being developed. And so men, and only men, who were on the path to priesthood would go through the steps. They'd be tonsured, they would become porters, they would become lectors, they would become acolytes, exorcists. Then they would be ordained to the major order of subdeacon, the major order of deacon, and finally the major order of priest. Well, the fact of the matter is, by the time you get to the 12th century, no man is being ordained a deacon unless he's on the way to priesthood. But the interesting thing is, in the East and in the West, we have evidence of women, monastic women, still ordained as deacons. But then the diaconate pretty much dies out, both East and West, because the role of the deacon in the monastery faded out, and the role of the deacon outside the monastery, in the men's trajectory, if you will, became almost purely ceremonial. So it's not until the Council of Trent when we find the council fathers saying, we really need deacons. But what they meant was we really need diaconal work. But you have more questions.
No, I think it's really people that would be really interested in that journey and in that pathway. I was just noticing when I've traveled to Europe with some friends, and I met some amazing women, things that don't happen in Australia, and I'm not sure if they happen in the States. Europe seems to be, I don't know, a little bit more liberal and not as hung up on rules. So a friend of mine took me to meet one of her best friends who was appointed abbot to a male monastery, because the ones who were still young enough to be active wanted to be active, and the older ones needed to be cared for. And they were very small, and putting one of them in leadership took them out of their ministry. So they asked her to become, and they appointed her abbot because they're a monastery, they're independent. So she's actually the abbot. And then a women's monastery found out about her and appointed, and thought, what a great idea, we'll appoint her as abbess. So she's actually an abbot abbess. So that was one woman that I met. And when I was reading your book, I'm just calling these stories about the grassroots movement. And another woman we went to see is the only Salesian, female Salesian in the world. And so, as you know, you've got Salesian sisters, and then you've got the priests and the brothers. And she said, no, I'm called to be a Salesian. And this is in Holland, so in the Netherlands. And we went and visited her and spent a day with her, which was fascinating, because although she couldn't be formally appointed superior, all the men in that community, she was the superior. They just looked to her, and we went and met with her, and just saying, well, how you felt called, not a sister. She said, no, I felt called to be a Salesian. So she joined, and then a couple of years ago, it was the first time they invited her, but they, under the church rules, they had to the General Council, but under church rules, she had to be invited as a non-canonical Salesian. So I just noticed there's these little movements and pockets of grassroots where women are taking leadership in what we think, male roles today. And when I was reading your book, you're right about the movement of the Spirit. There's these little uprisings, because you can't keep the Spirit housed in a tabernacle. It just bursts out. She bursts out everywhere. So reading your book, I was recalling these people, and I think you're right. I think it is a movement of the Spirit, and I think that's why your book now is exciting, because we need to articulate these stories and get them out so that women know that there is a movement, that there are opportunities, that you don't think you're mistaken in your call or your desire, that it's something that you've misinterpreted. So I think that is exciting. But Phyllis, you're on a commission, and it's interesting too, like the church isn't completely dismissive of it. You're on a commission, you're appointed by the Pope to be on the first commission, and then there's a second commission now. So it hasn't been dropped. It hasn't just simply gone off and filed away at the moment. Could you just explain what a commission is and your role on a commission?
Well, the Holy Father accepted a request in 2016 from the International Union of Superiors General, which is the leadership group of the major superiors of women's institutes and orders. There are about 1,500 women who belong. And he accepted their request to create a commission. They asked him in May of 2016, and by August 2nd, 2016, I was appointed. And none of us knew we were going to be asked. So that was part of the excitement there. You were just invited. And by Thanksgiving weekend, the last weekend in November in 2016, I was in Rome. And we met for 4 sessions. There were 12 people appointed, 6 men and 6 women. The men were all priests. The women were two women religious and myself, who were nominated by the International Union of Superiors General, and 3 others, some nominated by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and some, I think, picked by the Pope himself. But the 12 of us met in the halls of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the old Holy Office, which looks just like you think it would. It's big and old and Baroque, and the ceilings have got to be 20 feet high. We met 4 times, and we would always begin with Mass, celebrated by now the man who's now the prefect of the congregation, Cardinal Louis Ladaria, who at the time was the secretary of the congregation. And we would do the things that commissions do. Everything is a papal secret on the discussions that went on, but I can tell you we discussed. And it was about as exciting as any 12 academics talking about one topic could be, and you've lived through enough of those. So it's, and then we were asked to prepare a paper for the Holy Father, which we did. And we finished in June of 2018, and through Cardinal Ladaria got a thank you note from the Holy Father in July of 2019, and then we heard nothing. But so the question is, what does a commission do? We were given questions by the Holy Father, who visited us actually during one of our meetings. And those of us from out of town actually lived in the Holy Father's house. So I actually had the opportunity, because I had foundation funding, to live a total of something like 4 months in the Holy Father's house over those 2 years. And so we prepared the paper, he got the paper, and then the next thing that happened was the Synod on the Pan-Amazon region in October of 2019. And that Synod, I'm skipping something here. In May of 2019, the Holy Father gave a portion of our report to the International Union of Superiors General at their next triennial meeting. So they asked for it in 2016. They got part of our report in 2019. And he told them, I was in the hall at the time, he told them, you can do with it what you want. Well, they have not published it, so I can't really comment on what they received. But then he attended the Pan-Amazon Synod in October of 2019, and he received some pretty interesting comments about women in the diaconate. There were 12 language groups, 9 of which actually affirmatively asked for women deacons. The final report says, we're asking you to appoint women as lectors and acolytes, which are stepping stones, the remnants of the old cursus honorum. We ask you to appoint women as lectors and acolytes, because these are lay ministries, to formally install women as lectors and acolytes, and to reconsider women deacons, and to share our findings with the commission. He said, sure, I'll do that. Maybe I'll appoint 2 or 3 more people, and then nothing happened. So on April 8th of this year of 2020, the Holy Father named 10 new people, 5 men and 5 women, a new president, a new secretary, and that's all I know. We can expect that they will meet, I guess, in person after the pandemic ends. As far as I know, they have not met yet, even in Zoom. And they, they're a mixed group of individuals, not necessarily historians or theologians or systematicians, or but some catechists, a few deacons, some people who've done. The only work I've found is a couple of book reviews about women deacons. So we don't know. We just don't know what will happen. But this new commission, I would say, is the 4th or 5th commission to study this question, and since 1970, and it's yeah, I have to believe that the Holy Father is smarter than I am and knows what I'm doing, what he's doing, knows what I'm doing, but that he knows what he's doing. And I do believe he's waiting for the Spirit to speak in the world, and to so the encouragement that I think the repeated study gives is they've never said no. If this is the 5th commission, the one that hasn't met yet, no commission has found that women cannot be ordained as deacons. None. All have found that women historically were deacons. All recognize that there's a fight over whether in history they were sacramentally ordained. None has found that women cannot be sacramentally ordained as deacons. And so the decision is really up to the Holy Father. And I think he will make a decision in union with the whole church. And by the whole church, I mean East and West. And in that respect, the East is a little bit ahead of us. The Patriarch of Alexandria ordained 5 women as deacons about a year ago. There are women deacons ordained in Bulgaria, in the Bulgarian Orthodox Church. There are Armenian women deacons. So I think the Latin Church should be able to think about coming around sooner rather than later.
That's encouraging to hear, because, sometimes the argument in the past has been, oh no, it'll, ruin our pathway to ecumenism and unity if we do something that the other churches aren't doing. So that's heartening to hear that other churches have already moved. And of course, in the Eastern Church, the whole Mary Magdalene as apostle to the apostles, I think that's always been a very important title, and one that's not recognized certainly by our church. Only men could be apostles, and yet here's in the Eastern Church have always held up Mary of Magdala, as that. My mother's an iconographer, and she's got that was one of her first icons that I've got in my lounge room. That she did was Mary Magdalene, apostle to the apostle. She asked me of all the icons, which one would I like first. I said, oh, you've got to do Mary Magdalene as apostle to the apostles. And I said, and I want the scene with the Pope where she's handing, the egg. So that was one of her first. I've got that sitting there in my lounge room. I think too, one of the questions that I suppose would come up with people listening to this is why deacon and why not priest? Why the the commissions for deacon? Because it's really the priesthood that cuts out the leadership of formal leadership of women in the church, where they can play a role and go to commissions and move to bishop, and so that's question for you. Why deacon and why not priest?
Well, first of all, they're 2 different ministries. Secondly, I really have no history of women as priests. And thirdly, if you talk about ecumenism, it's quite a neuralgic point, more so in the East than in the West, about the maleness of priesthood. So I think that my work has never involved the priesthood. And in terms of a current discussion, I think it's a non-starter. And I don't think it's helpful to confuse the 2. You brought up ecumenism, and I'm remembering when a woman went and spoke to a major American cardinal and said, we need to have women deacons. And he said, well, we can't get ahead of the Orthodox on this. And someone else went and spoke to His All Holiness Bartholomew, the Patriarch of Constantinople, and said, why can't we fully restore the tradition of women ordained as deacons in our churches? And he said, well, we don't want to get ahead of Rome on this. And when I say this to large audiences, they just get hysterical laughing, because it's, well, could we please just give these guys each other's email, and let them figure it out? Because I think there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of fear of the term is the camel's nose under the tent, or some silly thing like that, that if you have women deacons, you can have women priests. But the opposite is also true, that it's really the cursus honorum that did in the diaconate. And it's the end of the cursus honorum that will revive the diaconate. Some writers, Paul Lakeland comes to mind, have written that there's really no reason to ordain a man a deacon before he's ordained a priest, that these are separate ministries. And if you think of it, the deacon is supposed to be working for the bishop, and the priest is supposed to be working for the bishop. So there's the stepping stone idea really has to be overcome. In terms of the misogyny has a big part in keeping women away from the priesthood, because the notion that women are unclean means that women cannot be near the sacred, cannot touch the sacred species, cannot be in the Holy of Holies. And if you envision an Orthodox church, you can more clearly understand that going past the icons, behind the iconostasis, is a separate place only for the priest. But in the Roman tradition, in the Latin tradition, we also have deacons approaching the holy. In some of the ministries at the altar, the deacon is up there mixing the water and the wine. The deacon is ministering to the cup. And part of this is scandalous to some people in the church, particularly some clerics in the church who don't even like women acolytes, let alone women as deacons. But why not priesthood? For me, for my personal research, it's just never been there. It's not been something I was studying. But the other point is that we've turned the church into a almost militaristic hierarchical society, whereas the deacon is lower than the priest, is lower than the bishop. And in order to have this job, you have to be a deacon. In order to have this job, you have to be a priest. In order to have this job, you have to be a bishop, almost like the military. You have billets that require certain designators, certain training, and also certain rank. And I think that's really what the Holy Father is trying to break open. If you look into Queer Amazonia, he has actually skipped over the question of ordaining married men as priests, particularly married deacons, and also skipped over the question of ordaining women as deacons, and moved to what are called Canon 517, paragraph 2, parish life coordinators. And he argues on behalf of the women. The 2/3 of the parishes in the Amazon region are run by women, mostly women religious. He argues on behalf of them being professionalized and fully appointed as parish life coordinators, separating the vocation to the diaconate, the vocation to priesthood, the vocation to the episcopate. So I think he's really trying to broaden our understanding of how church works. And if you think of church more as a circle and less of a pyramid, with more consultation, what he calls synodality, we'll find more equal discussion of things from different points of view. That it's not always Father knows best, but rather Father's view is this view and everybody else has a view. Not to say everybody's view is equal, because not everybody has equal training or experience, but rather everybody has a different point of view. And I think that's the point of the commission. we had 12 different people, probably with maybe 15, 20 different opinions, so.
Well, Phyllis, for those who want to find out more, I'm certainly recommend your book. But women's work's never done in isolation. Women always build community around them. You acknowledge a number of those women, but you do single one woman out for the dedication in your book, and that's Karen Doyle. And would you just share what an inspiration she was to you, or the support that she gave you, and why she's got the dedication on your current book?
Well, she's an old friend. I mean, that's about all I'll say. And she's an old and good friend. And I dedicate my books to old and good friends. Not that old, but I mean, long time, I guess, is better.
Sure. And other than your own books, what books have you gifted most often to others?
Oh, goodness. Well, I've written 23, so I...
Well, it can be one of your books.
I don't know. I mean, this season I've been buying The Plague by Camus to give to people. Because I find the discussion, the international discussion and denial, particularly the same as portrayed by Camus in his book, The Plague. But gee, I don't know. I wasn't expecting such a question. I'm reading about 3 different books at the same time. So I'm reading an old book about how the Rockefellers, particularly Nelson Rockefeller, learned about the Amazon region and really in coordination with evangelical Protestantism created the prosperity gospel in the 30s and 40s in South America. And I find that just a stunning book to join, a companion to Great Amazonia and the final document of the Amazon Synod, because the rape of the earth is just disgraceful and disgusting in the Amazon. And I'm sure, it's going on in other places in the world. This is the one we're focusing on now. There'll be others at another time. Certainly the ice caps are melting, there's global warming, and we're stuck in the middle of a plague that's affecting the entire world. So I'm reading a book about John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila, and they're working as spiritual directors. I can't remember who wrote it right now, but it's brand new, so.
Thank you. And I'm conscious that we're moving towards the end of our time together, but just as one parting question, if you could put anything on a billboard on all the major highways, on our major roads, what statement would you put on that billboard? A message for today.
I would ask, I often say the gospel is the answer. I think if you have a question, you can find the answer in the gospel. And I don't care what the question is or what it has to do about, whether it's interpersonal relations or national relations or questions within the church. If the gospel is the answer, and so if you want one word, it would be love. If you want one phrase, it would be read the gospel, and think about it and pray about it and incorporate it into your life.
Oh, okay. I love it. Read the gospel, think about it, pray about it, incorporate in your life. And on that note, we will conclude our time together. Phyllis, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your passion, and thanks too for your dedication. I think for all of us women in the church who are hanging in there, it's always inspiring and encouraging to have women like yourself as role model, and also as leaders, especially for younger women coming through to know that there is a place and that you can make a place in the church and in the community. So thank you very much for your time today, and I wish you all the best and every success.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And you too.
Thanks so much, Phyllis. So Thank you, and perhaps we'll be able to have a conversation again sometime on your next book.
It's coming. It's coming.
I thought so. Thanks so much, Phyllis. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Did you stop recording?
Just